Ladies and gentlemen, listeners, lovers, and friends, welcome back to the ProdCast of poetry. Ooh. Yeah, this show's going to be a little bit different. This is our first show of season 2, where we have an artist in studio who's going to perform some of his original works. Last year, we had the late, great Frank Castellano, and of course we had country rock legend Chris Higbee. This time we have a little bit of a different artist, still a lyricist, and this is why I think these particular podcasts are important, because it exposes art in a different way, and it hopefully makes you look at it in a different way. But you know, as always, before we get started, we got to talk about our Season 2 sponsor, the one and only Coates Car Care. Take it away, Mr. Guest.
It's the new evolution. Car washing is here. Coates Car Care app. Download, purchase, and get your car clean without even rolling down your window. Visit CoatesCarCare.com. Click on your Watch Now app icon to download and create your free account. Then purchase individual washes, buy gift cards, or sign up for any of our unlimited wash club programs. Again, download Coates app today and receive $3 off any individual wash purchased online or through our app. See more at CoatesCarCare.com.
Ooh, it was sexy. You read it sexier than I actually wrote it.
I want to go there now.
Right? So I think sometimes art takes on different forms. Can advertising be art? I don't know. But we're going to discuss these things today with our guest. And before we get to it, as we all sit up above Dave Grohl Alley in Two Ticks in the Dog Production Studio, we're about to crack a modern method. Scrappy German Heffenweiser.
Delicious.
Words can't describe.
Can't even describe it. I want to thank our guest for bringing them. And I want to welcome our co-host today, also one of my favorite artists and favorite human beings on the planet, Mr. Barry Berkey. Thanks for sitting with us today.
You got it, buddy. Having a good time.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Wow, that's a
Hoorah.
big clap.
Tell you what, look out.
This is a sing-along, guys, and then I promise I announce our wonderful guest today. When you guys think of poetry, I had this conversation with our guest the other day when I said, hey, I want you to come on our podcast, because I think it's important for the young poets and the listeners of the world, just in pop culture and any referenceable art. Is that a terminology? Referenceable art. It's art you can reference.
Sounds right.
What is your reference with poetry? Was actually, I don't know if that was the exact words, but what is the first poem you remember? Barry, what's the first poem you remember learning or you know?
Man, it had to be Robert Frost. I mean, that was who my grandpa liked. I remember having that little book. I remember reading that as a kid.
Very interesting. So feel free to sing along, because that's my first adult poem. You know what I consider an adult poem?
Okay.
Dr. Seuss is, I think, where I first, so I always associate poetry with like rhyming. I know that's not always, couth or in style, but go with me on this.
I'm with you.
And feel free.
To do what?
Sing along.
Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leaf's a flower, but only so an hour. Then leaf subsides to leaf, and Eden sank to grief. So dawn goes down to day, nothing gold can stay.
Bravo.
Wow.
Well, I thought you'd come in on that. That's why I said it. And you said Robert Frost.
You took it away, and I didn't want to interrupt.
That's the poem that I remember. Now, why do I remember it? Do you know why you remember it? So, just for prodders out there, that's just in my memory. I didn't read that off a page.
How old were you?
Probably 8, 9, 10. It was The Outsiders.
Oh.
Yeah.
So he reads that poem, Ponyboy reads that poem to Johnny, and then they have this conversation about it.
And here's a question about that. Why that poem? What did that poem mean?
See, this is why I love that you're here.
That's the secret to poetry. What does it mean? Why? Because to the author, to the script writer, it meant something different than to the characters and to the people in the audience, the listeners.
Right.
What does the poem mean?
Well, I think it's to Francis Ford Coppola's credit or to S.E. Hinton's credit. I don't remember if that's actually in the book. I think it is. But to whoever authored that, we'll just say both of them, the Johnny character, the Ralph Macchio character, explains it then to Pony Boy and says, about being young and how everything's gold and green, or how everything's green and it turns gold at the end of the day,
Stay golden.
Yeah, stay gold, Pony Boy, stay gold. Stay gold. Welcome to the show, to the ProdCast. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ron Book.
How are you guys doing today?
Yeah, man.
Good,
I'm doing
good.
awesome. And I'm doing great because you brought beer.
Isn't the day? And it's not. Usually I don't have a cocktail until 5 o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, they
It's
say.
5 o'clock somewhere. That's what the song says, right?
That's right. My wife says, "Oh, you're going to go have beers today?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to have beers." And then beautiful Ron showed up with
beer.
Yeah, I love you, man. And he said, "Oh, you're going to have, I brought beer." I said, "Oh, cool." And I didn't seem as enthused probably as I normally would. I said, "Well, I'm kind of hanging on the wagon a little bit. I haven't drank since Saturday." And of course, us being Irish.
Right.
And that's why I didn't show up with any beer. I was like, all right.
Well, and then as soon as he offered and you accepted and opened, I was like,
be rude not
you'd
to.
be rude not to. So of course I'm going to have a beer with you.
And you didn't want to perpetuate the stereotype of the Irish drunk.
Exactly.
I got you. But in secret, we're all Irish drunks,
Yes.
aren't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us how you got started on that path of being an Irish drunk and a poet, Ron.
I started as an Irish drunk from my old man's bar on the southwest side of Warren. Yeah. Back then, when we were young, driving around, we used to hang out in small mom and pop grocery stores in front of. We were 12 and 13, 14 years old, begging older people to buy us beer.
Not much changed, I'd say, in our childhood, probably.
Except these kids now they'll go to some juvenile detention center if they're arrested. We just went home. The cops would, I can't tell you the number of times when I was like 17, 18 years old and too drunk to drive, and a cop would pull me over in Warren, Ohio. He would know my old man, and he'd say, "Follow me," and to drive me home.
What was your dad's bar called?
Sam's Country Cabaret.
And that was over here?
Highland Avenue,
Yeah.
Highland and Dover. Yeah. He inherited that from his in-laws. It's a rough place. Great people, though, let me tell you. Right where his bar was, corner of Dover and Highland, right across the street, caddy corner, was the entrance to Republic Steel. Right across from the bar was a Tornado Church. You know what a Tornado Church is?
No.
A tornado church or tornado house is a house that's people live in the basement. It only rises 2 feet above the ground. You've never seen one?
No.
Oh, they're all. Oh yeah. I remember growing up in West Virginia, where I'm from, and we would visit every year. They're all over the place. It's literally a house. It's a basement. It has 2 bedrooms. It has a kitchen. It has an exhaust pipe. It has windows on every side. The windows are about this big. And it rises no more than 2.5 feet off the ground. In case a tornado comes around, they ain't going to get hit.
Yeah, I've never seen one.
Me neither.
You've never seen
No,
one? Really? Yeah.
That's the title of your next poem, Tornado House.
Yeah, they're all underground.
Man,
Yeah. How'd your family get from West Virginia to Ohio?
I wrote a poem about that called White Trash Pioneer. After my father his experience in the war, he was a World War II veteran. He was a young man. He was born in 1925, and he enlisted in the Marine Corps at the beginning of the war. And he was a child. He was 16, 17 years old, and he went to the Marine Corps. And he went through basic, and he was shipped out into the Pacific. And there's here's something stunning. I saw my old man walk when he was 19 years old.
You saw him walk? Walk? What do you mean you saw him walk?
There is a documentary called Shooting Iwo Jima, right? Now, let me go back a bit. There's been a picture, pardon me, there's been a picture that's been circulated in my book family, the Italian family, for the past 10 years. It is a still photograph of my father with a bunch of Marines on top of Mount Suribachi. I realized, because how the photograph was, that it was actually film. So for years, I tried to find the film. Well, I'm on Netflix one day, right? And there's a film, there's a documentary called Shooting Iwo Jima. It's a documentary about the cinematographers and the photographers who shot that battle. And this photographer is actually still entombed in the catacombs of Mount Suribachi. He was killed, it collapsed, they never recovered his bones, right? So I'm watching this thinking, okay, my old man, Iwo Jima, boom, interest. So I'm watching this 5 minutes into the film. There goes my old man.
Wow.
Across the frame. He gets on top of Mount Suribachi, right? His whole squadron or troop or whomever circle around him, freeze frame. There's the picture.
Oh, man.
Then he gets down and he walks away. And I don't know, it was 1943. I think that's when the battle took place. I could be wrong. He was born in 1925, so he's 18 years old.
Wow. Do you have that picture?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have the film clip, too.
Is it still on Netflix? I remember when that was on there.
The first 5 minutes, you'll see. I look just like him. And he's just to the left or to the right of the flagpole, and he's raising his rifle up. He's on the left frame, near left frame, on the right of the flagpole, raising his rifle up like that. And we look exactly alike. Exactly alike.
You
Had
ever
to
think
be pretty
about
emotional to see that. Man.
Oh, yeah. He's 18 years old. He's in war.
Did you move up here after that? Your dad met a girl from Ohio?
No. He married my mom in 1947 in Shinston, West Virginia. And they moved up here in 1953 because he didn't want to work in a coal mine. That's all they had back there. He was uneducated. Neither of my parents went to high school. They didn't finish high school. My old man quit in the 8th grade. My mom quit probably in the 7th grade because the Depression. My mom was an orphan. They got together, and there was no future. I said, I'm not working underground, so they came up north to Ohio. And they settled here because of the factories. There was no other way out. You're either a miner or you weren't.
Yeah. Was that part of your childhood, the talk of Iwo Jima and the war and those things? Your parents were very, you had young parents, right? I mean, they were young people that had to grow up extremely fast. And
there's no childhood.
Yeah.
My father was sent away on you remember the CCC? The Citizens Conservative Corps? During the Depression, they took the children of poor people and sent them to the woods where they worked for the federal government. In conservation, you'd build a road, you'd clear out brush, you'd do all this stuff. And they would pay you like $8 a week, but part of that pay, like a quarter of that pay, had to go back to your parents. You asked that question about my father in the war. Never spoke of it.
Wow.
Didn't mention it. I remember when we were really young on Seidel's Court, it was summertime, and I was embarrassed because I was wearing shorts. I was like 8 years old. I was sitting on his lap, and I didn't want to go out. And I go, Dad, tell us a war story. He goes, no. And he always told me, he was in the Marine Corps, he goes, a Marine never tells a war story. Never. Never mentioned it. Refused to talk about it. And he had half his arm shot off. His muscle on his right side. And I said, no.
But there were undercurrents of it all the time throughout your life. And in that poem, in the White Trash, what's the title?
White Trash Train.
Yeah.
It's about the Bedouins. I call them Bedouins. They came up, from West Virginia, and they came up from the Delta. They came from the Greek islands. They all came here to escape whatever was there, to make it better here. And whatever was here was better than whatever it was there.
Right.
And that's the important thing to know. It's, regardless of how bad it was here, it was heaven for them.
Well, that's kind of a cool intro to the work, because as Barry and I talked ahead of the show, just to kind of get our heads together, he had said, I learned a lot about Ron through his poetry, because you're a guy who we expose ourselves with our art, right?
Yeah,
Barry's
sure.
a painter, you're a poet, I'm a writer, we're all, and all those roles kind of intertwine. We're artists, and we expose ourselves with our art. And you, to your credit and courage, expose yourself personally in a very passionate and like look at me way. It's not like a,
Right.
shining the
Yeah,
light on,
no.
but you expose your truth through the word.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I think that's a great way to talk about how did you get, we had my Uncle Mike on a couple months ago, or a couple episodes ago, I'm sorry, the Jazz Man episode. And he has a similar story, right? War dad, Normandy and all that stuff. And he was football and Steel Town and being a tough
Right.
guy. But he wanted to play the sax. He was a jazz man. And that was sometimes stifled. Did you get into poetry? Was that something you were interested early? Was it encouraged from your mother or stifled from your father?
My parents split up when I was 10 years old, and I was brought up in a household without a single book. No pictures on the wall.
How about the irony there? Your
Wow,
name is Ron Book, and you...
Not a book in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
With your dad? You grew up with your dad?
I grew up with my mom.
With your mom?
Yeah. She was uneducated. She was a waitress. She worked, she had 3 kids without a skill set in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, without a skill set. She worked 12, 15 hours a day and never saw her. That was just normal. We never had any money. We were constantly, in 1 year when I was growing up, I bet I went to 4, if not 5 different schools.
Around here. Oh,
Always the new kid. We were always running, later on I found out we were always running away from the landlord.
Was your dad involved?
No, my dad was a pissant. No. There was a lot of bad feelings about that.
so he didn't help you guys out at all, but was in the area still.
He had another family on the west side. He would ask us to come over for Christmas, and he would give us a $20 bill, and we'd have to sit there and watch his children, not his, but her children, open up their Christmas gifts.
Man.
Think about it. Here's $20. Have a seat.
Do you think your art reflects a particular point of view that's cathartic to release some of that, like as a psychological introspection?
No, art is cathartic.
Sure.
Yes.
You have to have it. Otherwise, we'd all be carrying guns and shooting each other. Wouldn't we? We've all gone through shit.
Yeah.
My shit is no different than your shit. It might be defined differently, spelled differently, but it's the same. It's the same. I was brought up by a generation of parents who didn't know any better. Okay? My old man was slapped by his dad. My mom was slapped by her parents. My dad slapped me. My mom slapped me. I've never touched my daughter.
Yeah, we just talked about that the other day on the phone.
Never raised my voice to my daughter.
The cycle's broken.
It's the learning. It's the intellectualizing of the abuse and using it in a positive way.
And you have an
Ra-
amazing relationship with your daughter. To
Thank
step on
you.
your...
Yeah.
you have a great relationship.
We have a good relationship.
Yeah.
She's very positive. She's very confident. Because when you're slapped, every week, it affects your sense of confidence because you're always in the wrong, right?
Yes.
You're always wrong. And then you get angry. And you spend a good deal of your life angry, your childhood. Yeah, and my childhood was probably mirrors a lot of kids, but we had no stability. We had prostitutes living with us.
Really?
Mary and Juanita.
Tell us about it.
Yeah.
I wrote a short story about a picture that I came across, and they were Juanita and Mary. Mary had a child named Tina. little girl. And Mary was very nice. She was a friend of my mother. They came in, and my mother was very open. She was very kind. She gave. And she took these two young women into her house with us, and they totally abused the household. Until we came home one day from visiting my Aunt Pauline and Uncle Harold in Akron, and the entire house was cleaned out.
They took everything.
Not a stitch of furniture and all my mom's clothing.
That's awful.
Yeah. And they were terribly abused people. As you later on in life, you reflect back, how do you become a prostitute? It's not a career goal, is it?
Right.
No one sets out to hook.
Yeah.
At the bottom of the barrel. No other choice.
Go to the North End, man. Go to Woodland.
Yeah. Sometimes it was
They're not Cinderellas.
from abuse, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I think so.
Traumatic, which I think is good of you to kind of, from the standpoint of paddling or whatnot, kind of breaking that cycle.
Drug use.
Yeah. Did your dad, when you got old, did he discipline you?
He was never around, no.
No.
My mom did.
Yeah.
They divorced when I was 10. I was really, really young. And we were living on Dana Street. Prior to that, we lived on Seidel's Court. You know where that's located?
No.
It's on the island right behind Market Street Elementary School.
Okay, yeah.
Bucolic.
Uh-huh.
It was the most incredible, perfect 10 years of my life. Because everyone was exactly the same. They were all blue collar. They were all military veterans. They were all high school or less educated. And they had a billion children, and all we did was play. Okay, and my old man was working at Packard Electric, forming a union, and all the other guys. He worked at Ohio gas station on the corner where the cafe is now. There used to be a Ohio gas station.
Oh, yeah.
He worked there for 10 years, part-time. All he did was work. He was a hard-working man. He worked. His generation worked.
Mm-hmm.
They worked 2 jobs. They worked 3 jobs. They worked. That's all they knew. All they knew. And that was a great neighborhood. Then we moved to Dana Street up by McKinley School. And then I saw my father started slapping my mom in front of the kids. And then she left one night. I wrote a poem about it.
I remember reading that.
The black dress.
Yep.
The bloodstained dress. That still makes me cry when I read it.
It was an emotional poem.
Yeah.
And through Facebook and the poems I've seen of yours, your mother was everything to you, and your father, you just, you can describe how you feel in your own words. I don't want to say, but I could say it's just not good.
Yeah, and I later on I've come to realize since then that from every experience comes knowledge,
Sure.
good or bad, and you have to make a decision how you want this to affect you. I could have become violent, I think. I could have become an alcoholic, I believe.
Yeah.
But my choice, for whatever reason, I chose to go in a different path based on what I was witness to. And that's in my writing.
Well, that's why I asked that question earlier. Because there obviously is catharsis in art, and we're putting that in there. But do you ever think that, people will say, write what you know, right? Put your truth in there. So, of course, I write about, interject my experiences, and Barry interjects his experiences into his art and you into your poetry. But do you ever think you do it not as a motivation to write, but as a motivation to relieve yourself of some of that pain or some of that?
Once I discovered the true reason for my writing, yeah. And the real reason for my writing was cathartic.
When did you first start writing? Was education always a big thing? Because you're very educated now also, traditionally.
I've become more educated.
Yeah, right.
Early on I had a college degree, but I wasn't educated.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you went through the steps.
Yeah, I got my degree.
Yeah, what's your degree in?
My original degree is in English journalism.
Uh-huh.
And my MFA is in creative writing poetry. It came decades later.
Did you use the journalism portion of your degree?
I do now, only when I'm writing essays and literature and stuff like that.
Sure.
But I never, no.
Not as a career.
Not as a career. I never used my BA.
You used your good looks, Ron.
Oh, yeah, I'm a very handsome man.
Ladies out there.
Look out.
But so prodders out there that don't know Ron, he is a very handsome man. He's in very good shape. How old are you, Ron? 60? what is that? You don't want me to say it? Oh, okay. He's signing. He doesn't want me to say it because he still he doesn't want to be mistaken as like yeah, okay. Well, you look very good then. I'm saying you're very good for your age. You're very fit. But Ron was a male model. You were a professional model for a long time, an actor, and you know.
Yeah. It was hilarious. Talk about a self-indulgent lifestyle, man.
Yeah, I bet.
I seen you in some of those suits on Facebook.
Did you?
Yeah. Looking good, Ron.
Dude, fucking that's good, man.
You look good.
No doubt.
It's like, look at this guy.
I know. So, did you start writing? Were you writing before that part of your life? Or like, how did you get into it? I
started to write. I was living in Paris.
No, excuse me. I'm sorry. I was living in Paris.
Not like Texas. Not Paris, Texas.
I get you. Yeah.
And I was living in Montmartre, just at the very base of the steps. And I had this beautiful thing of...
what year is this? Can you give us a year?
1977, 78.
Oh, man. Okay.
And I'll tell you how naive I was, right? I flew one way from Cleveland to Charles de Gaulle with 2 suitcases and a bicycle.
That's it.
No, a bicycle.
Did you bring the bicycle back with you when you came back stateside?
No, he lost that.
Now, I always thought that everyone in the continent had a bicycle, and all they did was pedal every place, right? Everywhere. Because all the advertisements I saw were beautiful young women in short shorts on bicycles. 10-speed bicycles. And handsome men, 10-seat. Everywhere they're bicycling. Not one person except me. And I had to carry this bicycle in a huge bicycle box from Charles de Gaulle on the bus to Paris. Lug it upstairs to the 5th floor, because there are no elevators. They're just 19th century stairwells, which means they're as wide as your head, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have a bicycle box. You know what a bicycle box is?
No.
It's a box that holds your bicycle, which is the length of the table and twice as tall. And you have a bicycle. And everyone's looking at you and they're laughing at you because you have a bicycle and you have no apparel that says you're a professional bicyclist.
Did you ever ride the bike?
Never. Never. I sold it within 2 weeks because everyone laughed at me. It's like when I went jogging. I was a runner at that time. So I bring my jogging shoes, and I'm there about a week. Once the jet lag wore off, I'm there about a week, and I'm hanging out. And I said, I need some exercise, so I go running. Don't ever do that. Don't ever go running in the streets of Paris at rush hour, especially above the Etoile, where you have 12 lanes like this.
Ugh.
Cross his fingers, and they're all going like this. The only rule that applies is that the person on your left has the right of way. Now, he might be over here, and you might be over there, but eventually he's going to come over here. Got it?
Yeah.
5 lanes, and I'm running.
How long did you live in Paris?
Off and on for about 7 years, I think.
And you're modeling the whole time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool.
Man, what a crazy lifestyle.
It was cool. It was, think about having abs, being that young, making a certain amount of money without any responsibility, being surrounded by beautiful people.
Some great parties, huh?
So, Ron, listen, Ron just shot Barry a look across the room, okay, because we are socially distancing. But it's funny because when Ron and I first were talking, he says, what are we going to talk about on this podcast? And I said, and I'm going to not use the word that I used, but he said, what are we going to talk about? I said, well, my 2 favorite subjects are women and sports. And, of course, Barry's are as well. And so when Barry and I were talking, he said, what are we going to talk about? I said, poetry. He said, but I told Ron, women in sports are our go-to.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, again, not to sound, but I'm very secure in my own sexuality. Ron is a very handsome man. And you probably had a lot of opportunities. Yeah. I'll ask the question again.
Okay.
When did you start writing poetry?
Well, I'll get back to that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the ladies instead in Paris.
My roommate left. the apartment. She was, you have a base apartment, you pay some, but you're gone all the time.
Yeah.
You're there for 15 minutes, okay? And she moved out, and she left a poetry by Baudelaire, a book.
Is this in French?
Yes, but they also had...
Okay. Did you speak French at the time, or do you speak French?
I could speak travel and restaurant.
Uh-huh.
Which means I couldn't get lost, and I would always eat.
And do you want to come home with me? You probably spoke that too. Yeah.
And heard it.
Yeah.
From both genres, though. But, It was the late 70s. Not that I partook in the left.
Handsome man.
It's okay, man. We're not here to judge, bro.
Thank you.
Not here to judge.
And so I started to read, and there were translations involved, and I just got, wow.
What was the poetry about? Did you even know
French,
at the time?
man. It's love.
Yeah.
Lost
Sex and
love, found love,
Mm-hmm.
sex, love. Yeah. Love. Over and over and over again. Yeah. Beautiful. And translation is something I've just gotten into the past year. It's really a cool process of translating a language into English. It's really cool. But getting back to that, and then I just started to mess around. Mm-hmm. And I did it secretly.
You're in your 20s, mid-20s at the time?
Yeah, and then I went away from it. I moved from Paris, then I moved back to Chicago, and then I'd go to Europe, once, twice, 3 times a year, and then go back to Chicago, And I wrote secretly, and then I let it go for the longest period of time.
Why secretly?
Like,
you didn't think it was good enough, or it was secret because it was like not manly
poetry
enough,
is a weird thing. Mm-hmm. You don't want to confess that you write poetry because you're afraid your friends, they don't want to hang out with you anymore. Mm-hmm. There's the stigma attached to writing poetry, especially when you're in your 20s and your 30s and you're in the fashion business.
Mm-hmm. In any business, really.
Yeah, in any business.
Yeah.
There's a stigma.
I'm an artist. Oh, you're an artiste.
You're so overly sensitive to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which some of those stereotypes are true. I'm an overly sensitive person.
So
My wife
am
will
I.
tell me, yeah.
So am I.
Yeah.
You have to be.
Danielle tells me all the time.
You have to be. If you're not, what's the sense?
I just call it finer tuning. We just have finer tuned, What's a cat have? Whiskers? We have finer tuned whiskers.
Like there are those guys who drink beer out of a can. There are those guys who drink beer out of a crystal glass. Yes, please. Thank you.
I want to jump into this since we're in bicycles and sure. I want to jump into this since we're in bicycles and we're in poetry, if I may.
Absolutely, man. It's your show.
The bicycle rider.
Yeah.
I am the boy rider, the bicycle rider, the red Schwinn rider, the wind-washed obelisk of palms. I am the boy rider, the one pedaling from the realm of the backhand, the king of the goddamned. I am the boy rider, the fire grabber of the moon and the sun. I am the boy rider. I am air and the moon-edged sky. I am the boy rider, my fingers webbing through the air. I am the boy rider, inside the wind, crossing my face, washing all away.
Did it much better than me.
Well, thank you.
Tremendous,
Well, thank you.
tremendous.
Thank you.
It's the voice, the melodious
Thank you.
Tom Jones voice.
The poem, this is my truth, but I'm asking you because I think this is what's interesting about this possible show. Not possible, but this what's possibly interesting about this show. Let me reframe my words. The stone palm, right? The obelisk, the stone palm, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? The fingers webbing through the air. The boy rider, the wind crossing your face, washing it all away. Now, I don't think this is a poem about Ron in Paris in the 70s. I think this is a poem about Ron having caught a backhand from a parent or someone else and getting on that bike and escaping as the wind washes away. Is there any truth to that, Ron? Now, we didn't talk about this ahead of time. I'm just asking. It's not like a magic trick, but,
That's exactly what it's about. It's about escaping my old man.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a
freedom on a bike. Remember growing up?
Oh, man.
Remember,
Yeah.
you'd get really pissed off at something. You'd grab that bicycle, that Schwinn or whatever it was, and you had we always had little cards in our spokes.
Yeah.
And then just taken off.
I ran away a dozen times on my bike. Just gone, you know.
And there was a feeling about taking your hands off those handlebars and raising your hands like this and feeling that wind. There was that sense of escape.
Yes.
So, yeah, this is all about my old man. It could have been my mom, too. She was a smacker.
Yeah, sure.
But she had more reason.
Yeah, it's a beautiful poem. And we talked ahead of the show, and we were just saying about like how a lot of people, I don't want to point fingers at any generational differences that we all have, but I feel, this is my truth, I feel we are surface dwellers more so now than we ever were, that we don't look beneath, that we don't look into the subtext, that we just kind of take it on the surface. Now, you don't have to be a scholar, obviously. Right. I'm not giving myself like credit as to, I know you, right? And, Ron and I are friends. And so, and of course, Barry and I, we're all friends. We all talk together. So I don't read this and say, like, it's not some mystery that I'm unraveling.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of times people would see the title and think it was about and maybe because they don't know the word. I had asked about the pronunciation, right, earlier. Obelisk. I always have trouble with that word.
Me too.
I know what it is, but I don't, So maybe it's the fact that it's a stone hand and the washing away verbiage. But poetry is interesting to Ron and to me and to Barry because it challenges us as to what we are. It's not just green eggs and ham, Sam I am, right?
You're not spelling it out.
Yes.
I think that's what's great about poetry.
Every art form, to me, seeks a response. Mm-hmm. The goal of creating something is to get a response.
Yes.
That's what I think. That's why you paint. That's why you write. That's why I write poetry, for a response. And the response is going to vary. It can be really good, it can be average, it can be really bad. But the goal is to create a response.
Yes.
That's what I think.
100%.
You said yesterday on the phone, poets have serious and complex things to say.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. And you try to say them in the simplest way.
Mm-hmm. That was interesting, too, what we talked about. We were talking about writing books, because I'm more of a book writer. I'm trying to write a book. Been trying to for 20 years. But that's a different art form, and you can, I don't want to say fake it. Well, Barry and I talked about albums yesterday, or bands creating albums, and somehow, now there's more filler on an album because we can skip ahead, or we can we just want to hear the singles, the hits. But you can't really skip ahead in a poem because it's very short. It's very terse, which is, I said, I like Hemingway the best, not the best, but he's one of my favorites because his sentences are declarative and they're short and it's very terse and tight. And you're not laying down oodles of shit, superfluous prettiness. Filler, yeah. A poem is so short and so you have to know what you want to say. What's your creative process? Walk us through that.
More often than not, it'll come across as a picture.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'll think in my mind. I'll walk and walk and walk and think about it and think. I could think about it for weeks, not all day long. I'm not a nut, But the thought keeps coming back. The thought keeps coming back, and then eventually I said, then I'll get another line, and this is all in my brain, as small as it is, as small and as weedy as it is. There's only so much room there. 2 lines max, and I write in the morning. I get up at 4:30. Yeah, it's early.
Yeah,
very early.
Jeez.
Whew. And then I'll put those 2 lines together, and then I'll overwrite. My poetry will become a Faulkner novel. Mm-hmm. We talked about Faulkner, and he said, and he was a poet. He began as a poet, and Hemingway began as a poet, and Faulkner, and this is one, and I've read every one of his books. The world's longest sentence is in Absalom. We talked about this. It's 1,200 words. One sentence. 1,200 words. There's some short stories that aren't that long.
Right.
You know? And he said, in a novel, you can get away with writing shit. Because a novel's filled with words. He goes, the poetry is 1/10 of the novel. And that's what you want to get. So I'll sit down, and it's early in the morning. I don't listen to music. I've had a cup of coffee. I'll sit down in my little room. I'll put on a lamp. No music, nothing. And I'll write those first 2 lines. Then I'll just write gibberish. Gibberish. Up and down stuff. Elongated sentences. I don't worry about spelling. I don't worry about punctuation. I don't worry about anything. I'll just write that. All of the fruit comes out, you know.
Vomit on the page.
All over the page.
Yep.
Boom, 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 boom. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of times, and I use this as a trick in my creative writing classes and in my tutoring class, I said, I just want you to sit down for the next 5 minutes. Don't take your pencil or your typewriter off the page and just write. And write garbage and write poorly. And that's what I do. And then I go back in like a butcher at a cow. I have no romance with the cow.
Not a surgeon and a scalpel.
No,
Right.
no. I have a hacksaw
Big
and
chunks.
a chisel, and I just start knocking shit away. And I'm looking for rhythm. And I'm looking for imagery, and I'm looking for simplicity, and I'm looking for that moment. And some of these poems, when I originally wrote them, they were 2 pages long.
Wow.
Then I go back through, and 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 I thin it, I thin it, I thin it. I find the right verb. I find the right noun. I find the right object. I find the perfect word. Because that's the one thing about poetry, you know. Every word you put on page has to have a reason to be there.
It's got to count.
It's got to count for something.
Yeah.
And that's the mistake most beginning poets make.
Most beginning writers, period, I think.
They just write because they're so insecure. And I was the same way, and I still am. You're so insecure about what you're putting on page not having any merit that you just overflower the garden.
That's a great way to put it.
Do you ever share your work before it's done with other poets to get some idea or inspiration?
I have 2 poets that I trust,
Okay.
and neither of whom is around here.
Okay.
And they come back and they just give me, and we go back and forth, and we work in different genres, work in different ways. Our syntax and our rhythm is completely different from each other because you don't want someone to mirror your work because then it becomes their poem and vice versa. You want someone who's out here to talk about what's here.
But you don't bring it to them until you're in the surgeon stage, right?
Yeah. It has to reach
you
a
hack it
certain-
out, and then you...
Yeah, what can I do? What's missing here? And, you know, it's a writer's life. I've had a few relationships break up because they don't understand the writer's life. It's like I have a really good friend, and you know who she is. I won't give away names, but she's a rotund photographer who lives downtown Warren, does a lot of portraits.
You didn't have to say that. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm not going to.
I know who that is.
I'm not going to give her name away.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
a lovely, sweet
She's
person.
great.
And I said, you've always made one mistake, except for her last relationship. You've always gotten involved with guys who don't understand the creative mind. You go out with straight guys.
It's a story of my marriage, Barry.
I find that hard.
Yeah.
You know?
My wife just shakes her head at me sometimes. Like,
I said, that's your problem.
Yeah.
You need to get with a creative. And this guy she's with right now is a great guy.
seems like a real nice guy.
He's a nice guy. He understands. There was some time, and she told me, she goes, there were some times when it was a tad intrusive or not understanding, but now we've reached a point where he gets it. You know, it's like sitting there one day I'm writing, and my daughter comes in. I don't know how old she is, 14. She goes, what are you doing? I go, I'm writing. She leaves. She comes back 5 minutes. What are you doing? I go, I'm writing. She goes, you haven't done anything in 5 minutes. You're not writing.
That's hilarious because my wife will come out to my studio. I'm painting and I'm not doing anything. I'm like organizing, trying to get to the process of it. And sometimes it takes hours.
Yeah. I'm just sitting there like this thinking. Sorry.
That's okay.
She goes, no, you're not doing anything. Yeah, I'm writing. No, you're not.
Yeah. That's the process, right? I mean, it is.
That's
It's
the
part
process.
of the process.
And so when I go away and I don't talk to someone for an extended period of time, a whole morning, I'm not doing anything. I'm writing. And once you've found that nugget in the side of the mountain, you got to dig it out. If you don't dig it out, it's going to go away.
Yeah.
It's going to dissolve into dust, and it goes away.
Yeah. I call that the flow.
Do you?
Like I get into my flow,
Yeah.
and then I need you to be away. Like I'm going to push you away
Yeah.
if you're coming into my space, because I know that flow is not going to, it's finite. It's not going to last. It's going to, and it could last extended periods of time. That's where you find it at 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And then you're 4 o'clock in the morning and you're still in that. I know you do the same thing when you're painting.
It's hard to find it.
It's-
When you do,
You
you,
can't get
just
it
want to
back.
be left alone
Right.
until
Left alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Left alone. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
My very first screenwriting professor, great guy, Clifford Vaughn, Bowling Green State University. Still talk to this, not still talk to him. We still keep in contact. He gave me, and this is in reference to what you're talking about the butcher, and he gave me great advice. I don't know if it was his, so I don't know if I'm quoting him or he was quoting somebody else. Screenwriting is about having the ability to kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Because you come with these things that you're, oh, that's a clever run, or you love them, yeah, and you're in love with the words, in love with your ability to mold the words into something.
I'm a genius.
Yeah, right, right. I always tell, if I was teaching writing, I always would tell kids, like, or if people were consulting on the script, and they say, oh, I'm done with it. And I'd say, put it on the shelf. You want to read it? I'd say, no, put it on the shelf for 2 weeks and then read it again with a fresh set of eyes and get rid of the stuff that doesn't move it forward. And then when you're done, then give it to me.
Yeah.
The scalpel rather than chucking it away. Sometimes you just got to chuck it away.
Yeah, and poetry, because it is so intimate, is never finished. We talked about this downstairs coming in. To me, a poem is never done.
Well, art, right? They say art's never finished.
Never
it's abandoned. Yeah.
You might sell a piece, but I bet if you go back to the house where you sold that piece, you're going to look at that painting and you go, you know what?
I could have done this.
I could have done this. Walt Whitman, the story is Walt Whitman took 70 years to finish Leaves of Grass. And then I don't believe it's a great story, but on his deathbed, he raises himself up. He rises, he goes, at last, it's finished. And then collapses and dies.
I think that might be the romanticism. But, yeah.
A little.
Ron, tell us a little bit about poetry and academia, man. I know that you went from a poet in the 70s and wrote and then educated yourself. When did you get your degree? Before you went to Paris or after?
My undergraduate degree?
Yeah, your journalism.
Before. Yeah.
And then you went there.
And then I went, and then I came back. And
You got your MFA like 7 or 8 years ago?
I think it was 2013 at Ashland.
Okay, because we were doing shows at
Yeah,
the time.
yeah, right,
We were doing.
right.
Ron would hold open mics for poetry, and we would do different shows at the art museums or at the
Right. We had
Lime Tree.
We had that great show over at the Tag, remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was
remember that.
incredible. That was incredible. It was
Yeah.
multimedia, and it was doing all this stuff.
Yeah, it was
Very
cool.
good show.
That was the best show. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think before that, I was working with Jason and another guy, a bus driver, who played the tuba. Jason played the drum. Remember Jason downtown? He lives above in Greg's building. Nice guy, bespectacled.
Maybe if
Kind
I
of
saw him,
nerdish
probably.
looking. You would know.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
he plays the drum. He hadn't played the drum in 10 years. And so he brought a friend who played the tuba. And I think that was the very, very first show we did at Tag. And we had all this original poetry, and they improvised
Oh yeah.
perfectly
Yeah.
to the words.
Yeah.
Now think about a tuba and a snare drum.
Yeah. It was like a spoken word kind of bop 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 right with the backtrack. Yeah.
It worked perfectly.
Yeah.
Perfectly. But getting back to your story about academia and poetry, creative writing, I don't think any artist needs, now that I'm in flashback, I don't believe any artist in any genre needs to go to college to learn how to produce art. Mm-hmm. I really don't. I think
Right.
it's a scam.
I agree with that.
Right.
I think
yeah.
it's a scam.
Yeah. I think it's only in the structure of it and push you forth because you're going to get this mark so that you can eventually get this piece of paper that said you did all this bullshit.
And
you
the
know?
university,
Not that it's
yes,
bullshit,
and the
but
university-
they get paid.
They get paid heavily.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I just think with art, it's more self-taught. You continue to educate yourself on
Sure
what you
you
want to
do.
learn and how you want it
Sure.
to progress. You don't
It's
need
through
anyone
the
to do it.
process and the mistakes.
What does a degree give you? You can, if you get an MFA, which is a degree that's bent on teaching, more than a MA. You can teach painting. Okay. Does it make you a better artist? That because you know the vocabulary?
Well, that's kind of the argument. It teaches you the vernacular but you could do that your own.
Of course you can.
But it forces you to. You're going to take, my degree's in film. It's like we learned, I watched movies, and wrote papers on movies. Yeah. But it taught me Eisenstein and Fellini and shit that I didn't,
So you can teach.
I could have done that on my own. Well, hold on though. It is so that you can teach, but it's so that you do know the confines and the language of the existence. Right? History. Like if we don't know our history, we're doomed to repeat it. So the stuff so that you know the rules so that then you can go break the rules. I'm looking at these paintings behind Barry. Those are all Barry's paintings on the wall. No one taught him how to do that. The process of the
resin.
The resin.
The resin.
It's
through experimentation.
Yeah, he did it himself, right?
Yeah.
We're all blind.
A lot of mistakes.
But you probably had.
Yes.
But you probably had. You could. I know you'll cite. Best art teacher. We did it in your show. Fusco, yeah. Right? So it was in a formal educational purpose, not college, mind you, but you probably learned a lot at college too, at Kent State. Maybe.
Yeah, but I think I learned more off of Fusco as a middle school teacher, just to
for sure.
enjoy it and no limits to what you can make, and that's middle school. Yeah. So college, like you said, is more. The technique and stuff, but you learn more of that on your own. In
middle school, you needed someone to introduce you to.
Yes.
How to mix paint.
Yeah.
How to cover the. I had a great. I'm a horrible painter. Did you ever see my self-portrait I did on Facebook?
I think I might have seen it.
That grotesque.
No,
that's all right.
I was going to say, I don't think it's. I think you're pretty good. Actually,
yeah, it's better than your thing. Yeah.
Well, I was at Turner Junior High School. Those schools don't exist anymore. And I was in the 8th grade, and I met a guy named Charlie Doherty, who introduced me to sports cars and art.
Wow.
What a dichotomy there, yeah.
Sport cars and art, and the fact that there is another life outside of Warren. Okay?
Yeah.
And photography. And I learned terminology. And we went to museum. The first museum I went to, I was 14 years old. I'd never been to a museum. What was the youngest age you went to a museum? Outside of a school trip? I never went to a school trip. To a museum.
Probably somewhere in Philadelphia visiting my cousins.
Yeah. How old were you?
Maybe 10.
10.
Yeah, not very old.
I remember I went to, not a museum, but the Trump Art Gallery over on Mahoney when I was in kindergarten. That was my first.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're introduced to that stuff, and it is what's the word? Organic.
Exposure.
It's organic. That's the best teacher.
Yeah.
Sure.
And his one rule to me was cover the canvas, then paint. He was talking about the details, the perspective.
Yeah.
Cover the canvas. I don't know whether anyone agrees with that. It's like when I write a poem. I cover the page, then I paint. Same thing. And I have a big problem now because MFAs have become an incredibly lucrative businesses for universities.
Do you feel that those universities are trying to mold those artists into the same form?
There are two different MFA programs. One is campus-based, NEO MFA program, which is Kent, Youngstown, Akron, and Cleveland State, where you work for the university as a GA and you attend class. The other is a low residency, where I went at Ashland, where you go every summer and you are embedded in this poetic conversation for 2 weeks and you don't leave the campus. Now, the on-campus program is about creating teachers. I don't know one poet who has graduated from the NEO MFA program or any other campus-based program who teaches poetry. The low residency program is geared and patterned after creating a book of publishable poetry. You are workshopped 12 hours a day by working poets and writers And your goal there is to create a book of poetry and learn from the workshopping. You workshop.
That doesn't sound very enjoyable.
It's hard. You get your ass kicked by knowledgeable people. And you have two choices here. And there were a lot of choices people made to leave. I mean, it started at 8 o'clock in the morning, and your first session ended at 10, and you are pounded by a learned professional, a poet, about creating your art. This works. This doesn't work. Try this. Get out of that. Don't use scream. Don't use verbs. Show. Don't tell. Show. Boom. Pardon me. Boom, 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 boom. And then you go to lunch. Then you come back. Workshop. Boom, 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 boom. And then you go to dinner. And then you read your work in front of these people. And the next day you talk about your work. That was better for me than sitting, especially when I have a whole problem with the whole academic world, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work that well for me.
But you're meddled, you're molded, you're beat like a piece of tin into a shape, and your shape was your work. Where can people view your work, Ron? Where can they read your poetry?
I'm working on a new piece, and I'm trying. And here's something that
besides Facebook, mind you.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand this. Okay, there's a direct connection between academia and published poetry.
Right.
85 to 90% of published poetry, the poets are attached in one way or the other to academia, either through the press or through their agent. And for those of us who are outside of academia, I'm not an academic, it is so difficult to get published, a whole book. You can self-publish. Okay. But you want to be published by a knowledgeable publisher, and it's so hard to break into that niche because you're not a teacher.
Right. A lot of the poetry publishers are academic based.
Now, that's a brand new phenomenon, James Wright never taught a class in poetry, though he had his PhD. Raymond Carver never taught a poetry class. Mm-hmm. Okay?
Times were different, though, right?
Completely
so that's why you
different.
say it's yeah.
And I believe in my heart of hearts, and I'm not going to apologize, it's a business.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong here.
You're not grinding an axe. I don't feel like you're grinding an axe.
No,
you
I
know
don't
what I'm saying?
This is my reality.
Yeah, right.
Sitting in these MFA programs and listening to young women who are 21 who are writing biographies.
Right. What the fuck do you know at that age? Unless you're Anne Frank.
And they're paying $25,000 a year.
Right.
And the school's taking it. Okay? And it's nothing against them. It really isn't.
No,
it isn't.
Yep.
And they're working hard and their hearts are in the best place. But if I read or listened to one more 22-year-old girl talking about being broken up by her boyfriend, I was going to stand up and just fucking punch her out. And you know who told me that? I'm not going to even, one of my instructors at my low residency MFA program. He goes, Ron, if I hear one of these fucking girls, she's 22 years old and she's talking about
her hardships.
He goes, I'm 62.
Yeah.
I've had more shit in my life.
Right.
I am worthy of being written about.
Yeah.
But they take the money.
Oh, yeah.
And the fastest growing program in universities across the country, if not the entire world, are MFA creative writing programs.
Really?
Isn't that something?
Yeah, it is.
Go on Facebook. Go on the internet and just Google.
Well, we talked about it at one point because
Yeah.
I dallied with that myself. I just want the masters. I don't give a fuck what it was in, only because at some point when I'm done with this part of my life, I'd like to be able to go and teach at a college level. I taught high school in another life, 20 years ago almost. But You can't do that
They don't exist.
without a master's degree, right?
And those teaching positions don't exist anymore because people aren't retiring.
Yeah, right.
Can you imagine? You're making $125,000 a year. You teach one class a semester, and every other semester you go on sabbatical.
That's the life I want right
That's
there.
very nice.
Why retire?
Yeah.
I would never.
My sabbatical, I'm going to Milan to study, I don't know, middle-age poetical symbols.
Breweries.
And you're paying for it because I've got an endowment. You're going to pay for it.
I would never retire.
And I've taught the
Right.
same class for the past 20 years. And these, and my last professor, one of my professors at Kent, and God, I love the guy, 77 years old. 77 years old, still teaching. The same thing he taught 30 years ago.
Canterbury Tales.
Don't get me started.
Ron enlightened me, shined some light on Canterbury Tales yesterday because we were talking about like the first poetry we read, and he said, "Did you ever read? What was your first poem?" That's why I led with the Robert Frost, and you said Robert Frost, which was perfect. And he said, Canterbury Tales they taught you in school. And I said, well, I didn't. They taught us that, but I didn't read it. And he was right because it was like an old English, and it was like
Chaucer.
stodgy. And he was like, "Do you know what it was about?" And I said, "No, I didn't." I probably copied the notes off of
Cliff notes.
Carrie Costello or somebody else that was smarter than me or that did the work. And he said it's about religion and fucking, which I thought, man, why wouldn't I have read that as a young guy?
And the worst part is that it's taught by teachers who don't understand it.
Yeah, right.
But
right.
if it was part
of the curriculum.
It was the model.
Yeah.
If it wasn't that, it was Beowulf.
Beowulf.
Oh,
There's
Beowulf.
another one. There's another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Beowulf was a monster, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Like a wolf or something.
And then what happened?
Cliff note that one too, Ron.
I
Well,
was
you're younger than me. We didn't have Cliff Notes. I had to listen to Ruth Partridge, who from Warren G. Harding High School, whose boyfriend died in the Great War, and she wore the same haircut she had in 1917.
in the same dress of mourning.
Same dress.
No offense to her. God bless her. Did
you
she
know
smell
her?
of roses? No, I'm thinking of another teacher we had at St. Mary's.
Oh, my God.
She smelled of roses all the time. That was her perfume.
Ruth Partridge. And if you have anyone who was in Harding in that time period, she is a person very learned, okay, but so entrenched in Beowulf and Chaucer and Old English. Okay? Stuff you just sat there and went,
Well, you're learning it younger. It's kind of boring. I mean, you just kind of,
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I wanted to read Catcher in the Rye. And they didn't have that for us. We didn't read that in Catholic school because it used,
The F word.
four-letter words.
And there was an F word
and they
used there
talked
for the
about
first
sex
time.
and smoking
yeah,
and shit.
that's,
I actually bought that book at Book Nook when it was still open on Elm Road, and I read it on my own when I was 13, and I was entranced, man. It was I'd never read anything like that. That book probably made me want to be a writer. I bought 2 books that day. I bought Macbeth, Shakespeare, and I bought J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. And it was, but people think sometimes now in this, going back to this academia and this belief system, that we all want to be the wonder kind. We all want to be that lightning in a bottle that strikes at 27 years old. And I can remember looking back, being a moderately handsome fellow, not as handsome as Ron, mind you.
I understand.
I bet you do.
I've heard that before.
I was at a hotel listening to my friend Joe and Adrian play jazz. I was in college, and they were playing at this hotel lobby bar in Toledo. And Joe was a keyboard player, and Adrian was a sax player. And we went, and a group of us went to support them. And there was a wedding that was getting out. And I was 21 or 22, similar to the girls that were like writing about their breakups. I'm not knocking your breakups, girls. You can
Break up as much as you want.
Yeah, I'm sure Taylor Swift, did it better. But anyways, there was this woman there. She was striking. I'll never forget, she was 51 years old. And I saw her, and I was at the bar, and I kind of,
Wanted her.
I for sure wanted her. But I was finding my swagger at that time. I had realized that I had, I was able to to talk to women and not be, and it was starting to demystify the idea of sex and things of that nature.
Right.
And so I had never talked with not
Mature
in that
woman.
way. Yeah, not in that way.
Cougar.
Right. Cougar.
Now it's a cougar.
Yeah.
And so I was at the bar, and she actually approached me. I put my pheromones out there. I lured her in with my bait, and she came and talked to me, and we started rapping, and I was drinking whiskey or probably scotch or something. I was trying to be very astute. And
Very George Hamilton.
yeah, right. And she probably saw young George Hamilton in me, not as probably as handsome. And she said, what do you do? What are you, she was like, well, we were playing cat and mouse a little bit. And I says, well, I'm a writer. I want to be a writer. It was like, I'm still trying to admit that I'm a writer, Now I can do it. But she says, you're a writer. She said, how old are you? And I said, however old, I was 21 or 22 at the time. And I told her, and she said, what are you going to write about? She was playing with me.
Yeah,
and I said, well, and I was kind of like not defensive, but defending my position. And
Sure.
I said, well, I've lived an interesting life so far. I was trying to get her in, okay? Get her in. But I go back to that story and think to myself, that person, that 21-year-old person at the time, had no clue. And this is why it's taken me maybe 20 years to write something of
merit,
substantial,
something emotional,
Yeah.
with character.
Read us something that you have, Ron, that's of merit and character that you've written recently. Ron brought some great poetry with us, and
Fantastic.
It'd be unfair for him to not perform. Perform, Ron, perform.
Perform.
Maybe one of your favorites. I'll go one real quick while you search for the one.
Please do.
This is one I think we can all access because it's a popular cultural reference. Some of us will be able to. The people in this room will be able to. Some listeners that are younger, maybe not. It's called Miles. What happens when the wind falls? Does it become the smooth swelling moon of cool? It is that black space, wonderment in tenor as blue is hidden in water. That's actually a question. That was a question. I read it as a statement.
It's okay.
It is that black space, wonderment in tenor as blue is hidden in water. It's funny how we do the up and down of the accentuation. Anyways, I broke the poem, but the undying eternity of the long note, held within and so long ago heard, widens its wings over hillsides. The spine arcs then falls as dreams of tempo over the gravesite of the forgotten bebop. The languid leaning, the blue, horn and slanting sounds, jazzes, the white space of rhythm inside, the oldest of my bones. That's a great poem, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, of course, we read it. Barry and I read it earlier, and we But Ron, for those of us that aren't don't know you as well, what is that about, my man?
Miles Davis. Have you've listened to his song?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
He holds on to those notes. Seemingly, where does his breath go, Mm-hmm. And you know what's interesting about Miles Davis is that he was upper middle class. His old man was a dentist.
Right, yeah.
Everyone thinks, you always think of these black guys, and they come from the abject poverty, and they stole the trumpet that they first learned to play. Now, he took music lessons. He was college educated, and there's this great picture of him, and that's in my stanza of the spine arcs and then falls. There's this great photograph of him playing, and he had a blue trumpet. Pardon me. I think it was blue. It was a different color. And there's this arc of him, and his back sways like this, and he's hunched over, and his hair is falling down, and he's playing that trumpet, and he's just playing that trumpet for himself.
This must have been in the 80s when Miles got into that whole other thing.
No one else, man. He was playing for himself.
No, he would turn his back to people, right?
Turn his back, and just that note was so pure. And I've done a lot of listening to him, just how he could hold on to that note, seemingly forever.
Well, it's funny because when we talked about it earlier, You said, people could mistake that from the title as being about running because it's called Miles.
Yeah.
So when I first read it, words like wind and cool, right? Because these are all, references and albums of my blue, and then of course tenor. And then as we get to the jazz, slanting sound jazzes, the white space of rhythm inside, the oldest of my bones. Man, that's some really awesome shit right there, man. Seriously, yeah.
That's what music does to you. I mean, who's your favorite musician?
I mean, that's really hard to even.
I'm glad he asked you that question.
Yeah, I'm like, man. Van Morrison's one of my favorites.
Van Morrison, yeah.
Another poet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We don't
There's
think
something
of it as
about
the poetry of musicians, of lyricists sometimes.
There's no music like jazz.
No.
There really isn't. I mean, you can't. I've been listening to a couple of Paolo Nutini. Are you familiar with him?
No.
He's the Scottish kid. He's really this voice, and he sings. And I've always listened to Dylan. I've always listened to him. Herbie Hancock. I just like the sound of instruments. Mm-hmm. And Miles Davis has always hit me so strongly. Just how it's so intimate. And I'd like to think, though I'm completely wrong, that his intimacy, my intimate poetry is the same as his intimate music. I write for myself. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then you take from, and we talked about this, you take from it based on your experience.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Play.
Yeah.
I don't write to be public. That's not my goal.
Right.
That's the same I paint. I paint for me.
You paint for yourself. Yeah.
It's therapy also. I mean,
it's therapeutic. You get rid of a lot of shit that normal straight people can't.
Yeah.
That's why they're all alcoholics. Pardon me.
True.
And drug abusers. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't have a creative outlet?
Well, it should be encouraged more too. You've done this, Ron. You've said had this conversation before. You said everyone should write poetry.
Everyone.
And I don't know if that's a literal translation or figurative, but I take it as a figurative and a literal, but as a figurative, that everyone should do art.
Art.
Whatever your art is. If you're a painter, if you're an actor, if you're a poet, you're a writer, you're a musician.
Do it.
Do it. And do it. It doesn't matter if you're doing it good or doing it bad. That's
matter.
All subjective and maybe objective to some degree, but who gives a fuck?
No one should.
Just go do it for you.
Yeah.
Make it bad. It's okay. You're going to do 10. Mike Polk was on the last show, a couple of shows ago, and he said, we're talking about viral videos or whatever, And he said, for every one that's got 1 million views, I got one that's got 7, and I just keep churning them out. I'm not really worried. Let someone else judge them.
Yeah.
That's what stops writers and artists sometimes, is that we self-judge in the process while we're creating. Vomit it on the page, man. Do it for you and get it out and let somebody else decide whether it's good or bad. And then forget about what they say, because who really gives a shit?
Yeah, I don't believe in critics. Mm-hmm. Who the fuck are critics? Who gave you the gavel?
Especially ones that aren't in the creation mode.
Yes.
Right.
Like, dude, if you have never done this, you can have an opinion. You're entitled to your opinion.
Opinions are different than critics.
Right.
Analysis.
Yeah. And if you have done it and you at
have
least
merit.
Have
merit.
Tell me why.
Yeah.
It sucks. Cool.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, it's okay. Cool. And make
Yeah.
Shall we?
Shall we what? Dance? I can't.
I would.
My reputation is such that.
Listen, let me tell you about your reputation, okay?
Okay. This is a brand new poem. This is a poem. I went to Kent State and I was there on May 4th. And we were having a reunion of all of my friends, those who are still alive. So I sat down, and this is the first draft of a poem I wrote about my feeling walking off campus after that murder, which is what it was.
On May 4th.
May 4th murder. And back then, you went to Kent, right?
Yes.
Did they have the lilac path when you were there?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. Well, that was from the original campus.
Okay.
And it was a path down Taylor Hall, the old football field. There was a path that was shrouded by plants and lilacs. And I remember walking after that, down that path to home, and the silence. And the only thing you heard back then was a siren. Okay. Called Lilacs in the Silent Morning. Mourning. Okay. Afterward, the only cloud, silence. Along the lilac path, one dark bird clung to a silent branch, a red berry in its beak. Inside the row, bent lilacs grabbed, held, begged. Through branches, the briefest, purpliest scent, life, invisible to the wounds, hugged the earth, unable to rise above the sound of silence. The sound of siren. The quiet of the small among the elders murmured and failed to rise above their blood caked under the violet May sun.
Were you there when that happened?
Yeah. Taylor Hall was my college. I was up and around it.
Yeah.
I was on the pavilion that surrounds it, and that throng of people unable to leave. Yeah, and they were all swarmed as the guard came up the hill. They swarmed and went to that side, and I got caught in that, but I wasn't able to see anything. And just,
How many people were there
what?
during that protest?
Oh,
Thousands?
no.
No.
It was Monday. They were going to class. Three of the kids murdered were going to class.
Yeah.
No, 2 of the kids murdered were going to class, and 2 were involved in the protest.
A shame.
And I do say murder again and again and again.
Yeah. No doubt.
And I remember standing there and not knowing what to do. You're 20 years old. You have no idea. Okay. Gunfire, sirens, National Guard, people bellowing in bullhorns, kids just sitting down, not knowing where to go. And then eventually a professor came out and ushered us down and through, and we went home. Pardon me.
What could you do,
First confrontation with violent death.
Not your last, though.
Not my last, no.
You want to tell us about that story?
That was yet to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When did you start working in your dad's bar?
Probably my sophomore year of college. I would come home like once a month for a weekend and help him out at his old man's bar. Sam's Country Cabaret. What a joint. Good people, really good people. And I told you this story. There was across the street, Highland Avenue. You know Highland down here in the south side, just on the very outskirts of the city. Republic still was one. And across the street there was a Tornado Church, and there was a pastor who would have Sunday sermon. And between every sermon, he would come to my old man's bar, and he would have a Budweiser beer, and he would have a cigarette. And I remember he always had patent leather shoes, and he had ribbons as laces. And we're sitting there, and he came over once, went back, did his sermon. The people came in, he sermonized them. They left. He came back to the bar. He had a Budweiser cigarette, went back, sermonized again, came back. I don't know what time it was. It was mid-morning probably. We're standing there. My old man is with his friends up at the corner. And he's sitting, and I can't remember the pastor's last name. And he is sitting there in the middle of the bar, and I gave him his Budweiser and his beer, and suddenly the door swings open, and this young man comes in. He's wild looking. And he pauses once he enters the bar, and my old man knew him. And he goes, "I'm going to buy everyone in this joint a beer, especially that man." And he points at the pastor. The pastor does this. Raises his beer, salute. And so I get a beer for everyone. I pat him down. Put him down in front of the bar, and the guy gets up and he walks into the bathroom. I said, okay. So I turn around. Seconds pass. He comes back out of the bathroom, walks by the pool table, walks in front of the ice chest, steps behind the pastor and shoots him 3 times in the back of the head.
Just like that. No declarations, nothing.
Takes the gun, throws it on the floor. It slides under an ice chest. He goes to where he was seated, and he just proceeds to drink his beer.
Crazy.
Now,
You pissed yourself at this point, right?
I'm a stoned, long-haired college kid. It's Sunday morning. I'm just getting some bucks to go back to school, and suddenly I see a murder. My old man goes, "What the fuck did you do that? Why did you do that?" And the guy goes,
No reason.
my old man kicks the gun away from him and then calls the cops. The cops come and arrest him, take him away.
What was the reason that happened?
There was a trial here. My dad had to go and he had to witness. The guy had a cousin who the night previous to the murder had been abducted. This is what I heard. Had been abducted by a bunch of young black guys, taken somewhere, beaten up. Someone said he was sodomized, though I don't know about that. And then he was lit on fire and he was murdered. So the guy went out with the intent of murdering a black person.
Horrible.
Talk about the time, sign of the times as we're having this conversation again over and over, even now.
I've been trying to write a poem about that for the longest time, and it always comes out so melodramatic. I'm going, doesn't make any sense.
You talked about how the pastor died, how it was undramatic.
No ceremony.
He just fell out. You said an electrical outage.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen somebody, die, just boom, it's just a drop. Yeah.
There's no, we're used to John Wayne dying.
Yeah.
At that time, we're used to all these people dying in this great dramatic flourish.
Staggering around.
It's Macbeth,
right.
It's Othello, it's all these great writhing on the floor. No. Boom.
Maybe that's where you start.
Maybe I'm trying to find. Yeah, I've not gone back to the poem in quite some time.
Seems like it still haunts you, that image of what you saw.
Shit. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
How many years ago was that? 40.
Don't say it because people do the math. He's trying to hide his age.
Well, I'm only 45.
5 years.
Right.
So 10 years ago.
Early 70s. Yeah, stays with you.
Ron has exposed himself, not physically, but that's a raw story, man. That's what poetry is, being raw. Did that stay with you? Did you have...
It's still there.
Well, I know that. I'm saying, obviously, that never leaves, but
right.
In the initial removal from it, any dreams and PTSD, and did you ever have... No.
The drive back to Kent was interesting.
Did you do it that day? Oh, my God.
After the cops came, they interviewed all of us. Yeah, I had to go back to class the next morning. Normalcy.
Wow.
Man.
And you explain something like that to people, they don't get it. College kids, they're all stoned or drunk or...
Think you might be lying to them?
Yeah. Or, what? What? How'd that happen? Yeah, really? Okay, let's go. There you go.
Well, because Ron's gotten naked in front of us, and I don't believe in doing things without getting naked ourselves, I told a very personal story the other day on the Mike Polk Jr. ProdCast. Before he actually told his story, which was about an embarrassing time in his life, I told mine first. I'm going to read you a poem, Ron.
Okay.
If I may.
Yours?
Yes.
Cool.
It's called Their Master's Keep. And this may be a poem from one of our poetry nights. As they sleep in masters' cages, subtle fire beneath rages. Yes, I am going to rhyme this shit.
Wow. There we go.
That was you didn't have to say that.
Like Dr. Seuss.
Green eggs and ham.
As they sleep in masters' cages, subtle fire beneath rages. Waiting patient, cage doors open, wishing once upon a day. Food for thought shoved through the cracks, piecing piecemeals, looking back. Down in the deep, their masters keep thoughts of freedoms for their friends. But times they only must pretend that life behind the leash that lets furry friends smell human breath. Now, Professor Ron,
Yes?
do tell.
About your poem? Put it in front of me.
No, I want you to tell me how good looking I am.
The mirror will tell you that, Jimmy. The mirror will tell you that.
Ron is a teacher as well as a poet. He is a sportsman.
Model.
He is a model. I would call him a coxman.
Yes.
He is a coxman.
Definitely.
He's been an incredible guest on the ProdCast. This has been one of, honestly, I say this probably too much, but this has been one of my most favorite shows because we're talking about true art and the exploration of it.
Can I make one note?
You can make as many
Get
notes
rid of
as-
all the punctuation.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah, as they sleep in master's cages, subtle fire beneath rages, waiting patient, cage open, wishing once upon a day. Boom.
Nice.
Don't put any pauses in there. Just let it flow. I think it's cool.
I think you're cool.
No, not really.
I'd like to hear
Ask
Ron
my daughter about
read
that.
Sex Picnic to us.
Ron, one more for
That's
the
one
road,
of my
man.
favorites. I'd
Are
like
we
to hear
almost
from
done?
him.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're
Barry, don't you want to read a poem?
No, I want you to read it. I don't want to do any insult to your work. So I want to hear how you feel about the Sex Picnic, because that's one of my favorite ones that you've sent us.
Oh, how funny. Thank you.
What's your favorite part? I won't ruin it for the audience, but is it the biting? Right? I don't
A
know.
little bit of everything.
It's been amazing having Ron on the show as he looks for his poem to read to take us out with. I want to thank my good friend, one of my best friends for
Barry.
20 plus years, Barry Berkey,
Yeah,
for
buddy.
coming in and sitting in.
Brilliant
yeah.
artist.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah,
man.
Brilliant.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, if listeners out there, if you haven't liked our Facebook page, The ProdCast, certainly check it out. You'll see not only Hong Kong Wu-Tang Fooey on the wall behind us, but you can check out some other works of Barry's. Of course, hit him up, Barry Berkey, on Instagram. And I want to thank you for coming, and I want to thank Ron for coming and for bringing Modern Methods Brewery, a downtown Warren original, right down the alley from Two Ticks and the Dog Productions. Go check out Adam Keck and the scrappy German Hefeweiser, or any type of beer that he has, particularly Panthertown Pilsner, where the artwork has been done by yours truly, Barry Berkey.
Yes, very good too. The beer.
The beer. Well, the art. Oh shit. The artwork is very good. Also, yeah. The beer is great. The beer is one of the beers that is not as strong as some of other Adams beers that we've talked about in the past. We want to thank all our podcasters, all our prodders for listening today. And, of course, as always, go check out Coates Car Care and the Coates Car Care app at coatescarcare.com.
And he's going to finish with Sex Picnic.
Sex Picnic. Take us out, Ron.
Sex Picnic, otherwise known as When Love Doesn't Go Right. In tall pasture grass, naked, the length of a red blanket, my purple toe tickles. Carving spine, black hair, autumn skin. I know it would always be. Close my eyes, son. Thin the grass, bend and close the brown. One autumn afternoon, an ant bit my toe. I want to make a note about that, okay? You see all the white space?
Yes.
That's a poetic device. That's there for a reason. You know, you can, as a poet, and I try to tell my kids this, you use the white space of the page to create pause. Pause creates reflection. So, you know, when I make a pause, when a poet makes a pause like that, it's by intent. He's not trying to remember the words or where he was in the poem.
Well, it's interesting you say that because jazz musicians will talk about creating space.
Yeah.
So that the other guy can come in and we can have this,
Yeah.
you know, symbiotic tete-a-tete, for lack of better terms.
Right.
Yeah.
And poets use, you know, Whether the space is in the line or between the stanzas, they use white space as a moment of reflection and pause. And it's all about having a bad relationship and being frustrated, being in love with someone in secret and not being able to tell people about it. Whether you're having an affair or it's something that's just, it's just awkward for you.
Well, Ron, there are some bullshit artists out there and some bullshit poets. And you, my friend, are not one of those.
Thank you.
Oh, way.
Yeah. Hey, Ron Book, tell us real quick for the listeners out there, the prodders out there, where can they check your work out?
Honestly, I try to produce one new poem every week on Facebook, My Story, with a bit of artwork. And I'd love to take a picture of Barry's artwork and use it as the background for some of my pieces.
Beautiful. I love it.
Anytime.
Yeah, I like
kind of cool.
There's a cool thing forming here, people.
Yeah.
I will post a hyperlink to Ron's Facebook page when this episode goes live. So check out the ProdCast on Facebook, or of course, always go to theprodcast.net. Until the next time, listeners, lovers, and friends, and poets out there, stay electrified. Ron, Barry, thank you guys. Love you guys.
Thank you, man.
Great job.
Cool.